Hi, what's up? We're still talking about music. Now we're going to do my top 15 albums. Like I said on the songs list, this does not overlap. So any album on here does not have any of the songs on the song list, just so I get to talk about more music. I listened to quite a bit of music that was new to me this year, but a lot of it was actually pretty old. I got into some genres that I hadn't really gotten into before. One of which is sort of like outsider folk primitivism from Japan, um, mostly through the music of Reiko Kudo and her husband, Tori Kudo. See, that's what we call a segue. So I got into their music, which was mostly released in the early 90s into the early 2000s. But I found they're still actually doing stuff. They're still out there. Which got me listening to the latest project by the Kudo couple, which is Tori Kudo's Galake. It's one of the more experimental and inaccessible albums in their collective catalog, which is saying a lot because they make pretty weirdo music to begin with. This one is really structurally interesting. A lot of their music has to do with kind of repetition, with sort of mimicry and kind of a call and response, almost like bird song, I would say. But this one takes it to the next level and actually shows you each track, the progression of its creation. So the way it's structured is that there's like a short segment with Tori Kudo humming or whistling a melody into his phone. I believe that's the gimmick of why it's the phone here. So it's like very lo-fi, very garbled and short. And then that same melody you hear fleshed out and expanded with like a variety of other instruments, sometimes with other vocals, sometimes with his wife Reiko Kudo singing. Sometimes in live performance, you can tell there's like audience noises and stuff too. So you kind of follow this one short little melody through that entire evolution, and then it kind of, by the end, it's almost like unrecognizable. It's changed so much, and then it cuts back to the phone recording, and there's like another melody. It's a pretty cool concept. I think that's a really interesting way to kind of explore your own music making progress. Um, Again, it's probably not for everybody. It's pretty noisy and abrasive at times, and um, it's not really, full of pop bangers or anything, but very cool. And this sort of music I have really come to like over the last year or so. So I think going forward, I'm going to be following their careers with much interest and listening to things they put out, and it's great. It's a great feeling to kind of break into a new genre, into a new movement, and to rush back into the back catalog and see all these amazing things they've done, and then to carry that forward. Be like, what's next? Yeah, what is next? What's 14? Playboy Carti's Die Lit. This is his second album. Um, the first one was like revolutionary. It was a new pinnacle in several directions that trap music had been going in. His sort of hypnotic, repetitive, mantra-esque flow. And a friend of mine, when I was talking about this album, he was like, I don't know, it just didn't hit me as hard. Like, that first album was so iconic, and this one is just sort of more. And it is, it's just kind of more of that stuff, but dang, did I ever want some more? Um, it's so much fun to listen to music like this, to just let it hypnotize you and make you awash in the simplicity and the repetitiveness of his statements. Um, he kind of builds up this like aesthetic world where small elements will recur between songs, like rhythmic elements, like kind of the overall structures of the songs repeat in ways that are interesting and sometimes subversive too. I'd say to this album's credit versus his previous album, the guest features and kind of the clout capital that he's accumulated, that he gets to work with people as diverse as Skepta or Nicki Minaj on different tracks, is really, really well implemented. I think he really nicely marries himself with other artists, that they're able to kind of exist in this new musically structural world, you know, and adapt themselves to it. It's kind of the opposite that we normally see in hip hop guest features, which are normally like very ego driven and about like asserting your unique qualities onto a given track. Whereas here, it's like everything is kind of blended together very nicely, and it's just the small idiosyncrasies of each artist rise up in ways that is it's really interesting and fun. So yeah, good stuff. Very much looking forward to the rest of his career. There's one song where he says, "My stummy hurt." Do you know about this one? I think it's called like Costa Rica or something, and it's there's just an excerpt, just a few excerpts that leaked, and one of them, apparently the hook is he's going, "My stummy hurt, my stummy hurt." It's amazing. What the hell? Who does that? Who else would Playboy Cardi? And maybe Lil B or something. Lil B has a song where he goes, "Oh, my stomach hurts." Love it. Anyways, um, next we have Lush by Snail Mail. This is a indie rock artist. I think this is her first kind of major release. Her first album for sure. It's like really luscious, as you would hope from the title. The production is that kind of classic like wall of sound style where the reverb and the guitar and kind of all of the rhythmic parts is just overwhelming and floods your ears with this like really golden sound. And then on top of that, her voice is just this kind of fleeting, almost uncertain, unsteady thing that just feels like it's entirely fueled by her own emotions. Um, there's such like this kind of wavering quality to the album where you kind of feel everything kind of crests and subside based on her mood. And yet the music itself is so high quality, like so professional. Like all of the instrumentation is played excellently, and all of the rhythms and melodies and such are just like this kind of pinnacle of pop catchiness. Um, it's kind of like the contrast between those two things, you know, the almost, I keep saying the word primitivist. I gotta mix it up a bit. To call this primitivist and then also to call this primitivist, and sure, why the hell not, we'll call this primitivist. That means that the word doesn't mean anything anymore. But you can, it's like almost like a, I don't want to say amateurishness because it's not at all amateur, but it just contrasts so nicely with the parts that are more like pristine. She has a song called Pristine, so that's probably why I use that word. Um, I don't know. It's hard to put into words what's so unique about this album. The parts that are just really solidly good about it, you've probably heard quite a few times before if you listen to indie rock. It's more just these tiny little edges, these tiny little moments of kind of weirdness. Like on the last track, there's a part where her voice breaks just a little bit. It cracks. And I'm so enchanted by moments like that. And I think that's what, more than anything, really makes this album memorable for me. Um, so yeah, again, I have very high hopes for her as an artist. Then we have Pusha T's Daytona. So this is one of Kanye's 5 albums this year that he announced in some sort of fever dream at the height of his very controversial, very stupid ranting on Twitter. Um, of the ones he announced, this is the one that I actually had the most faith in. For quite a long time, Pusha T has been working on an album, so I thought he probably had a lot of things, you know, in the bank. Kanye has always been fantastic at producing Pusha T's voice, at bringing out just so this what's so iconic about it, both kind of taking him back to those days and clips when he was like the gangster rapper, the person who is fusing kind of gangster rap with like high fashion and excellence and this idea of kind of like luxury rap. Um, so, bringing out the force of that history but then also just juxtaposing it and bringing out so many like cutting edge futuristic things that we've never seen in production before. It makes for something that feels like instantly classic, that it's both so familiar and so fresh. um, and yeah, it was all of that and more. It exceeded all of those expectations. um, I guess I just wish it was longer. Kanye, again, in this bizarre numerology, decided that all of his albums would just have 7 tracks. um, so, it's quite short, but that means that every single one of those tracks is a banger. There's no time for the seemingly obligatory, like, corny love song type of thing. It's just a hit after hit after hit. Some of the moments in the production, again, you're just like in awe of the genius that is Kanye West and his ability to make music that just sounds really, really damn good. Um, like when the beat comes in on the first song, the beat switch on Santeria after the 070 Shake part, which of course is also fantastic. Artist of the Year. Um, there's the very infamous Drake diss track at the end, which ignited one of the biggest beefs in modern hip hop. With Drake's son getting exposed and stuff. But that track, I think, on its own, even without that kind of context, just comes across as this like really intense, creepy, like some real shit is getting said, even if you don't know the whole story to understand what it is. So yeah, I was very very happy with this. It was one of the first, if not the first, of Kanye's 5 albums that came out. I don't think it was the first one I listened to. But when I started hearing all of the positive press around it after it released, I was like a lot more on board with the whole idea. And we'll talk about some of the other albums later in this list. So let's move on to this. Everything is Love by the Carters, which is the kind of ad hoc pseudonym for Jay-Z and Beyonce. Um, this is their first full collaborative album. It had a lot to live up to given that the collaborative tracks they've done, like Drunk in Love, Crazy in Love, Lift Off, all of these are just fantastic songs. An album where every track lives up to that quality seemed like it would be a surefire hit. It was. There's basically no way for this album to be bad, given that these are two of the most talented musicians that we are lucky to coincide with. Working with a staff fueled by billions. They're basically hip hop royalty, and no one would not want to work for them. And the result is an extremely lush, gorgeous, varied album that succeeds basically at everything it attempts. Um, there's like the kind of continuing back and forth between their two kind of respective fields. Beyonce being kind of more of like a soul R&B singer, and Jay-Z being, one of the legends of hip hop since the 90s. But then you get tracks where like Beyonce is rapping and doing like an extrapolation of the classic Dr. Dre hook. Or I guess Snoop Dogg is the one that does the hook. Well, they both do the hook. Anyways, but she does the hook now. Um, and other tracks where she goes back to just kind of like full singing, and there's even one point where she does like a long extended vocal solo, and Jay-Z at the end like calls for a round of applause for her. It's really beautiful, and it reminds me a lot of this backstage video where she's singing Halo and Jay-Z is recording it, and he just like cannot get over how good her voice is. So yeah, really nice album, and kind of as I touched on there, a lot of what really makes it special for me is what it signifies in the life of these people. So this is kind of the final album of a trilogy, a pseudo trilogy of Beyonce's Lemonade and Jay-Z's 444. And Lemonade at the time was like a big dramatic event because it seemed to imply in the lyrics that Jay-Z had cheated on Beyonce, that they were fighting, that they were talking about getting divorced, like things were kind of rough, and it was this really empowering album of Beyonce kind of being like, if it comes to that, I'm just gonna move on, I'm a powerful, powerful person. I can do whatever the hell I want. And then Jay-Z's 444, an album deeply apologetic, talking about the struggles he's had, talking about that's like self-loathing elements, and but also, you know, seeking forgiveness, like trying to better himself as a person. I found both of those albums fantastic, very compelling. And now this, the finale, we got the good end. They're staying together. Everything is love. And they address like all of these events on this album in a way that is feels like very honest and open and kind of friendly, you know? Like I feel a close connection to them after going through all of this with them. And I'm not usually the type to kind of get caught up in celebrity drama. Like usually I don't really care. But the way they told this story through their art, I think, is quite remarkable, and very compelling. And yeah, it ended happy. Isn't that great that it ended happy? It so easily could have ended so sadly. But yeah, yeah, great album. Jay-Z still just raps like an absolute beast. Like some of his lines and stuff, it's just, it's like Jay-Z always hits this sweet spot where it's so clever and yet it's so cool that it's not like annoying. And Beyonce, of course, just an absolute generational talent with the way that she sings and her ear for like rhythm and this kind of bizarre improvisational feeling. It's bizarre insofar as that it feels improvisational when really, you know, it's the result of like dedication and a stable of genius pop songwriters and her own feelings and stuff. And yet there's moments where she does things that just sound like they just popped out of her, you know? Being able to have both sides of that is really amazing to me. All right. We'll cover the next 5 in the next video. So stay tuned tomorrow for more music talk. Bye bye.